Mr. President, we deeply appreciate the early, persistent, and strong leadership you have provided in promoting a real and accountable Patients' Bill of Rights. We're happy to use this opportunity to announce how we, at Families USA, intend to do our part so that we can join you in the Rose Garden as you sign this historic legislation. Recently, the Kaiser Family Foundation released its national survey on consumer experiences with health plans. It's a nationally representative survey of adults between the ages of 18 and 64 who have health coverage other than Medicare. The survey found that 13.4% encountered health problems with their health plans that resulted in a denial or delay of health care. Over the course of a year, that means 18.1 million people. Translated into specific periods of time, that means over the course of a week, it's almost 350,000 people who experience these problems. Almost 50,000 people per day. In fact, it's one person for every 1.74 seconds. The patients' rights ticker that we unveil today behind us reminds us how many people encountered a problem resulting in a denial or delay of care since the Norwood-Dingell bill passed the House on October 7 last year. To this moment, almost 17 million people experienced a denial or delay of care since the passage of the Norwood-Dingell bill on the House floor. And if we wait till the time that Congress is set to adjourn, we will be close to 18 million. We plan to take the ambulance and ticker on the road as we start Patients' Rights Tour 2000 next week. We plan to go to a dozen states, holding rallies to persuade reluctant senators to vote for the real Patients' Bill of Rights. States like Delaware, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Missouri. Our message to reluctant senators is straightforward. It's high time to pass the Patients' Bill of Rights so that millions of additional people don't have their health coverage lost. Pass the Patients' Bill of Rights now. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Andy Anderson, Executive Vice President and CEO of the American Medical Association, a great organizational leader and good colleague in the fight to pass the Patients' Bill of Rights.
Thank you, Ron. Good afternoon, everyone. The AMA is proud to be here today to urge the United States Senate to pass a meaningful Patients' Bill of Rights for all Americans and for their families. More than 2 years ago, the AMA hosted a roundtable discussion on the need for a Patients' Bill of Rights. Mr. President, you may recall that meeting and the heart-wrenching stories that we heard that day. There was the absolutely riveting story of a wife who had lost her husband because the insurance company had slow-walked her husband through the system when he needed and deserved immediate care. She told us how the insurance company delayed and denied his treatment and indeed rejected the very best medical judgment of her husband's physician until they finally okayed it, but only after the window of opportunity for treatment had closed, and her husband soon died. At that same meeting, we saw a woman who worked as a billing manager in a cancer specialist's office. She was moved to tears because it was her job to tell the patients that their insurance company had denied the needed care. Here's what she said, and I quote, "The hardest part of my job is facing a patient and telling them Your insurance plan has told me that your coverage is denied. This is what the doctor recommended, but we are so very sorry. And Mr. President, you may remember the saddest part of all was that what this woman said was that these horror stories were not the exception, they were the rule. Now, these are two poignant examples of what our patients in this nation are up against today in this very, very difficult environment. Similar stories like this are playing out across our nation every day. Day in and day out, physicians see the mental and the physical toll inflicted on too many of our patients whose care is being denied by the bottom lines of big insurance rather than the medical judgment of their doctors. So that's why we're here today, on behalf of the nation's patients and everywhere, to ask point blank, how many more lives and families need to be ripped apart, forever damaged, before a majority of the United States Senate musters the will, the commitment, and indeed the courage to protect them by passing strong, meaningful patient protections? We know that more than 80% of Americans want patient protections, yet their call is not being heeded in the Senate of the United States. Why is that? It's because the insurance industry is desperately and frantically pouring millions of dollars into a campaign of misinformation, misrepresentation, and indeed deceit and scare tactics, all aimed at defeating meaningful rights that protect the patients of our nation. So as the advocates of our patients and their health care, we must set this record straight, because contrary to these claims by big insurance, the protections we're proposing will not bring significant increases in their premiums, nor do patient protections open the door to lawsuits against employers who offer employees insurance. And so to tell Americans otherwise is to tell Americans a lie, a very, very big lie. So we urge our lawmakers to reject the politics of fear, to step up and to do what is right for their constituents and for our patients in America. Our message to the Senate is simple. Vote a real Patients' Bill of Rights into law, and do it now. So it's with hope and indeed with confidence that I tell you that this is not the last time we're going to gather at the White House on behalf of America's patients and their families, because we look forward to being right back here in the very near future to celebrate the moment when you, sir, sign a real Patients' Bill of Rights into law. Ladies and gentlemen, the time to act is now. The American public demands these protections. America's patients certainly deserve these protections, and it is time for us to deliver them once and for all. Mr. President, as you know, a lot of AMA members are Republicans, but this issue, patients' rights, is not about Republicans or Democrats or partisan in any way. It's about our patients and the patients of our nation. I want to tell you that the AMA greatly appreciates your leadership on this issue. You have been a true champion of patients and their families, and it is my great honor and privilege to introduce to you all the President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton. Mr. President.
Thank you so much. I want to begin, obviously, by thanking Dr. Anderson, the AMA, and the physicians who are here behind me from various medical organizations. I want to thank Ron Pollock, the Director of Families USA, who has been such a long and tireless champion of health care. As is often the case when I get up to speak, everything that needs to be said has pretty well been said. But I hope to bring it into some sharper focus in terms of what will have to happen now in the next few weeks if we're going to actually get a real and meaningful Patients' Bill of Rights. Time is running out in Congress, and there is no more important piece of unfinished business. You see these numbers up here, 18 million a year. We're trying to pass a minimum wage law. It will affect 10 million people a year. we're very proud here that we reached across party lines to pass the Family and Medical Leave Law. It has affected about 25 million people in the first 5 years for which we have statistics. I have already provided the protections of the Patient's Bill of Rights to 85 million Americans who are covered in any way by federal health plans. And yet, you see that the remaining Americans, nearly 200 million of them, have the experience that leads 18 million of our fellow citizens to suffer delay or denial of care over a year. Now, what are the rights in the Patient's Bill of Rights? Let me just state them one more time. We should never forget. The right to the nearest emergency room care, the right to see a specialist when recommended by your physician, the right to know you can't be forced to switch doctors in the middle of a treatment, such as chemotherapy or a period of pregnancy, the right to hold your health care plan accountable if it causes you or a loved one great harm. Now, as I said, these are protections we have provided to 85 million Americans who get their health care through federal plans. Fact. What did it cost to provide these protections? Less than $1 a month. That's a fact. Even the Republicans' majority's Congressional Budget Office concedes that the cost to cover all Americans would be less than $2 a month. And only congressional legislation can provide all Americans and all plans the patient protections they deserve. Last fall, thanks to the leadership of Congressman Norwood, a physician and a Republican, and Congressman Dingell, a Democrat from Michigan, the House of Representatives passed such a bill with a majority of 275 members, including 68 Republicans. Nearly a year later, I am confident we now have the votes to pass the very same bill with the same protections in the Senate if, big if, we can get it up to a vote. The bill's vital signs, in other words, are growing stronger, but it's still a near-run thing. If it were a tie, I know someone who'd like to break it. And as Al Gore always says, whenever he votes, the people win. But this is not about politics. I was glad that Dr. Anderson said what he did. If you took a survey in any community in America except Washington, D.C., there would be almost no difference in the opinion on this legislation between Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Now, let me remind you what the daily toll is. Ron's got the running total up there, but nearly 50,000 Americans every day face a delay or denial of care. Nearly 50,000. Every hour, more than 2,000 people fail to get the treatment they need. We can't turn back the counter, but we sure don't have to run it up. And this is not about statistics. It's about real people with real problems who deserve real care so they can get on with real life instead of the politics of Washington, D.C. That's what this Families USA tour is all about. It's about, let me just mention too, people like Joan Bleakley, who lost her sight in her left eye, in part because her HMO forced her to wait 3 weeks before seeing a neurologist. People like Doug Bolden, you'll remember him if you went with me to Missouri to the Patient's Bill of Rights event down there, a big, burly emergency room nurse whose patient was forced by his HMO to leave one hospital and travel more than 50 miles to another, suffered a heart attack and died along the way because he wasn't entitled to health care at the nearest emergency center. And believe me, these are not isolated examples. I've heard many, many more, and you've got the numbers here to back it up. So again, what this is about is whether the Senate leadership will let the votes be counted and allow a free and fair vote on Norwood Dingell. The American people need to be reminded. The rules of the Senate, which were set up to avoid measures being dealt with too rapidly, give everything but our annual budget the option of being subject to a filibuster, which takes 60 votes, not 51, not a majority, 60 to pass. Now, there is no question that this has been debated forever. We do not need any more time for debate. And the people who aren't for this bill ought to just stand up and tell the American people why they're not for it and why they think the doctors, the nurses, and 300 other healthcare provider and consumer organizations are wrong, and the HMOs and the insurance companies are right. And then they ought to let everybody vote. But it is an abuse of the filibuster to deny the majority of the United States Senate, representing an even bigger majority of the American people, a chance to have their way on an issue this fundamental to democracy. We don't need any more time to debate this. They don't need to put on the brakes to look at it again. This thing has been hanging around for 2 years now, and it's been debated in and out. It's time to listen to the doctors, the nurses, the patients, the other consumer and provider experts. To listen to a majority of members of Congress, including the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, who would vote for this bill today. The bill should not be held up or watered down. Again, I am willing to reach agreement. We reached an honorable compromise on one major provision with opponents of the legislation in the Senate, which everyone could live with. But we cannot abandon our commitment to a bill that covers all Americans, with the right to the specialist they need, the nearest emergency room care, the right to keep a physician during a course of treatment, the right to hold health care plans accountable, the right, in short, that allows doctors, not people who have no training in medicine and are concerned only with the bottom line, to make these decisions. And also a system that provides access to important clinical trials. In other words, a strong, comprehensive, enforceable Patient's Bill of Rights. We can do this. If we just let the Senate vote, we can put progress over partisanship, health care over special interest, restore trust and accountability to our health care system. We should do it now. But every single American should know what's going on. In order to prevail on legislation that has the support of more than 3/4 of the American people, including 70% or more of every political group in America, we have to do one of two things. We've got to persuade the leadership of the Senate to let a majority vote on this, and if a majority's for it, to pass it. Or we have to find 9 or 10 more votes between now and the time they go home to break a filibuster that is, in my judgment, an abuse of the filibuster system. There is no debating this. Everybody knows what the deal is. Everybody knows what the differences is. Meanwhile, I will keep negotiating. I will keep trying. But I will not abandon the people who are part of these numbers up here, because I've heard too many of their stories. Again, I thank the doctors, I thank the nurses, I thank Families USA, and I thank all the American people. We can do this, and we can do it in a nonpartisan way if we can just get the roadblocks out of the way. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, could you take a question? I was wondering, Mr. President, if you share the embarrassment that was expressed yesterday by the federal judge in New Mexico about the treatment of Wen Ho-Lee during his year of confinement under federal authorities.
Well, I always had reservations about the claims that were being made denying him bail. And let me say, I think I speak for everyone in the White House. We took those claims on good faith by the people in the government that were making them. And a couple of days after they made the claim that this man could not possibly be let out of jail on bail because he would be such a danger of flight or such a danger to American security, all of a sudden they reach a plea agreement which will, if anything, make his alleged offense look modest compared to the claims that were made against him. So the whole thing was quite troubling to me. And I think that it's very difficult to reconcile the two positions, that one day he's a terrible risk to the national security, and the next day they're making a plea agreement for an offense far more modest than what had been alleged. Now, I do hope that as part of that plea agreement, he will help them to reconstitute the missing files, because that's what's really important to our national security. And we will find out eventually what, if any, use was made of them by him or anybody else who got a hold of them. But I think what should be disturbing to the American people, we ought not to keep people in jail without bail unless there's some real, profound reason. And to keep someone in jail without bail, argue right up to the 11th hour that they're a terrible risk, then turn around and make that sort of plea agreement, it may be that the plea agreement is the right and just thing, and I have absolutely no doubt that the people who were investigating and pursuing this case believe they were doing the right thing for the nation's security. But I don't think that you can justify, in retrospect, keeping a person in jail without bail when you're prepared to make that kind of agreement. It just can't be justified, and I don't believe it can be, and so I too am quite troubled by it.
Mr. President, can you explain? Are you thinking in terms of clemency for him, for Wenhole?
Well, I'd have to look at that. It depends on if he's in fact, he has said he's going to plead guilty to an offense which is not insubstantial. But it's certainly a bailable offense, and it means he spent a lot of time in prison that any ordinary American wouldn't have, and that bothers me.
Mr. President, tomorrow morning, right here on this lawn, you are going to welcome the Prime Minister of India, who spoke today on the Capitol Hill, and he's calling for a stronger U.S.-India security relations and also fighting against terrorism around the world, especially across the border, from Indian border, cross-border terrorism. So what do you think, sir, coming out from this historical visit and also following your visit in March that you've been in India?
Well, first, I'm delighted that the Prime Minister of India is coming here. After my trip there, I was honored to be the first president in over 20 years to go. They're the world's largest democracy. We need to have a better and closer and more constructive relationship with them, and I hope that this will be the next step in that, and I think we'll make some specific agreements. The United States is strongly opposed to terrorism in any form, and I still hope that if not while I'm here, then in the future, because of the groundwork we've laid, the United States can play a positive role to a peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute, which has been at the core of the difficulties between India and Pakistan for more than half a century now. If you look at how well, I will say this again, if you look at how well the Indians, the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis who have come to America have done, the extraordinary percentage of them that are involved in the high-tech economy, the professions, building our country across a broad range of areas. It is tragic to think of what this conflict has done to hold back the people who live on the Indian subcontinent, who are still, all of them, living on around $500 or less a day on average, and who have proven by their stunning success in this country that they have the ability to be at the cutting edge of the 21st century. So I hope they can lay this burden down, and I hope we can help them. And in the meanwhile, of course, we'll have to oppose terrorism in all its manifestations. Thank you very much.
Explain to the American people about Vietnam, why you've decided to go.
Another press conference with the Prime Minister tomorrow, and I'll answer some more questions then.
Okay, travel pool. White House, Newtown, travel pool.
Can we wait quick?
Turn them on.
Hey, Mom, how you doing? Wait, yeah. Are you expecting? Good. Congratulations. Yeah. First shot?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Close.
Travel pool.